All right, so we got to talk about CJ So Cool's home invasion suspects. As you guys know, there's several suspects. I think there's like 4 suspects or maybe 5 suspects, something like that. But it looks like the details are now out. They had several court appearances, several indictments. I think they've been re-indicted again, if I'm not mistaken, and it looks like the charges got even longer. And another thing is that there's actually multiple victims. So it's not just CJ So Cool. There's actually a victim that's in the 70s. There's another victim, I think that, if I'm not mistaken, I think they drowned her in her own bathtub or something like that. They duct taped her. It's pretty shocking, folks. It's pretty shocking. So we're actually going to play this and react to it as well.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Defendant Queen is the ringleader of this group, running multiple different groups as they're committing the crimes that we've outlined in detail within our motion that we presented to the court. I would note, Your Honor, that the purpose of bail, as highlighted in Valdez-Jimenez, is to secure the defendant's presence as well as protect members of the community, and that the defendant, while we must consider their financial ability for any of these defendants.
So she is the ringleader. That is Miss Raven. She is the ringleader, which we kind of already figured out previously, but now I guess it's been confirmed that she is the ringleader.
To make the bail non-site. We are not. The Constitution does not require a setting of bail that the defendant can make.
So I think I've got this pretty loud and clear from your motion one, but on all of these, on this defendant as well as all defendants, your goal here is to set a preventative, you want a detention order, basically. Is that what you're seeking to do?
That's accurate.
Okay.
And the bail reviews that have been set by the district courts following the grand jury indictment. So, as we've highlighted, and I know it's pretty extensive, it's a 30-something page motion. These arrests of these defendants, it's the product of a multi-agency, valley-wide investigation into a series of incredibly violent home invasions. The crimes were, as I mentioned, violent and often unnecessarily so. Of the 3 victims who were home when these defendants were committing their crimes during the course of these home invasions, all 3 individuals.
So he's going to go over 3 victims. So it's not just CJ So Cool. Looks like there's 3 victims, according to what he's about to talk about right now.
All 3 victims were sent to the hospital. 1 with multiple gunshot wounds. 1 who was bound with duct tape and pistol whipped and beaten by 4 men inside his own home. 77 years old, sent to the hospital with brain bleeds.
So one of the victims is 77 years old, something like that, if I'm not mistaken. And that person got beat up by 4 suspects. 77 years old and got beat up by 4 suspects. I don't know if they duct taped them as well. Let me replay that part again.
Pistol whipped and beaten by these home invasions. All 3 individuals, all 3 victims were sent to the hospital. 1 with multiple gunshot wounds. 1 who was bound with duct tape and pistol whipped and beaten by 4 men inside his own home. 77 years old, sent to the hospital with brain bleeds. Per his wife's own testimony.
I think he said the last part, that person had like some brain damage or something like that. It's crazy.
The grand jury, to this date, cannot communicate using his words and cannot use his left leg, and was still in the hospital, at least at the last.
And that's the Las Vegas case, correct?
That's the Las Vegas. And then you have Jenny Lee, the woman who was home during the course of this home invasion with 4 of them present, who was not only beaten and pistol whipped, but also dragged in her own home to her own bathroom and drowned in her own bathtub.
She was drowned in her own bathtub. That is crazy. So they dragged her. This is, I guess, the 3rd victim. They dragged her in her own house, put her in the bathtub, and then drowned her. Let's replay that one again.
And was still in the hospital, at least at the last.
And that's the Las Vegas case, correct?
That's the Las Vegas. And then you have Jenny Lee, the woman who was home during the course of this home invasion with 4 of them present, who was not only beaten and pistol whipped, but also dragged in her own home to her own bathroom and drowned in her own bathtub. while these individuals were trying to extract value.
So they beat her up, pistol whipped her, or something like that, and then they dragged her in the bathtub and drowned her. Wow. So crazy.
And I would note that they both pointed out to the police that they were trying to cooperate and were happy to cooperate. These beatings and these extra efforts and lengths they went to torture and terrorize these people in their own homes in the middle of the night were absolutely unnecessary to achieve the goals of the
Torture and terrorize. This is the main prosecutor in charge. I think because Raven's attorneys are seeking, I guess, a lower bail, which I don't understand why, because it's not like she can afford the lower bail anyways. I think they increased her bail when there was actually more victims. I think it might have been like 250,000 or maybe like 500,000. I think now it's at like almost $1 million, something like that. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's at $1 million or maybe $750,000. So her attorney's been going back and forth. I guess they're trying to get it down to like $100,000, and they're trying to get her released to go back to Los Angeles. I think she lives with her grandma or something like that. They better not release her, considering all what she has done. And I mean, she has like a record of doing this kind of stuff. This is going to be crazy if they actually release her after what I just heard. 3 victims, one of which is a 77-year-old man, something like that, if I'm not mistaken. Dragged, beaten up, duct taped. The other one drowned her. They drowned her in the bathtub. Like, come on now. And they want to release her to California?
And so what we have, Your Honor, is, again, outlined in greater detail, incredibly violent offenses. We have an incredibly organized and sophisticated manner in which these crimes are committed. You have defendant Queen with evidence of her researching victims prior to them going into these homes and conducting these home invasions, of providing information of the victims' addresses and locations to her co-conspirators, as well as areas where they can park their vehicles so that they can get around going through security that may exist in these homes. Because all these homes are in high-end communities, and they all abut either deserts or golf course areas that allow the defendants to gain access to the backyard going undetected. And so you have defendant Queen in text messages that we outlined.
So she planned this out like very well. The fact that she directed, I guess, her the other suspects as to where to park, and then understanding, I guess, that there was some golf courses. Like, she must you know, they did it. It was so sophisticated, according to what he's saying. They probably planned this out way ahead of time. That's crazy.
Directing her co-conspirators where they should park their car so that they can travel to the victim's home without being detected by security in the area.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Keep going.
If you want to interrupt,
No, you're fine.
I'm happy to pause whenever. You also have the lengths that they went through, as we detailed in the video evidence and text message evidence, to conceal their identity during the course of these crimes, to coordinate and organize these home invasions together. I mean, you're talking about 2 separate crews operating in unison, committing these crimes at and around the same time in the same manner and fashion.
So she was operating 2 separate crews doing the exact type of work, basically doing home invasions, burglaries. 2 separate crews working at the same exact time. I think the crew in Vegas, that was like the 4 to 5 suspects. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, one of the suspects is still outstanding. But I guess they have all the information they need because they were able to recover all kinds of data off the phones. Like, they have a wide range of evidence that they were able to recover, camera footage. I mean, they got it all.
A lot of planning and thought that went into this. And then you have their efforts during the arrests to destroy evidence, which I'll get into in a little more detail later, to flee from police in vehicles at high rates of speed. One of the defendants, Mr. McDuffie. You have, which I'll get into in a little more detail later, to flee from police in vehicles at high rates of speed.
I think he just said that they were trying to run from the police at high rates of speed. Wow, this is crazy.
Defendants, Mr. McDuffie. You have defendants who have gone to every length to undermine and thwart any sort of being held accountable or when law enforcement approaches complying with law enforcement commands. So those are all concerns that I think that the state wants the court to focus on, especially when we're looking at the factors that the court considers for bail, to include the nature and circumstances of the offenses in which they're charged. So with regard to defendant Queen, Roberts, McDuffie, and Jackson, we have this home invasion at 426 Tranquil Peak, where that's the home invasion where the victim was asleep in his bedroom when two suspects barged in, kicked in his door, and then shot him twice and pistol whipped him during the course of that robbery. During the course of their fleeing from that scene, we have surveillance video of them approaching from another residence, the victim's house, and then fleeing from the house. They're carrying a brown backpack that they abandoned behind. Inside that backpack is defendant McDuffie's phone, which contains a significant amount of...
So I guess they were able to find a backpack, and there's camera footage. And then I guess that's what led them on that whole evidence trail. Let's replay that part again.
It's the victim's house and then fleeing from the house. They're carrying a brown backpack that they abandoned behind. Inside that backpack is defendant McDuffie's phone, which contains a significant amount of evidence, not just against defendant McDuffie, but also all of his co-conspirators as well. To include, if I could point out to the court.
So once they got that backpack, it was pretty much a done deal because they got the phone. They just get warrants on the phone from the carrier, the phone carrier, and they pretty much got everything. If the phone is unlocked, then it's way easier. If it's locked, I mean, they're going to gain access to it regardless, and then they have pretty much all the conversations, the whole game plan at that point. In addition to data that's collected whenever you are in a different location, there is different towers, phone towers that are collecting data on your location, GIS coordinates. So they pretty much got them very well, and then they know every single party involved. So it was it sounded like it was planned in a very sophisticated manner, but I guess it wasn't executed all that well, or at least it sounds like that, because it looks like they dropped the bag or they abandoned the bag. I don't know if they did that on purpose or not. They didn't really say that, mention that.
Text messages between defendant Queen and himself, where she is actively advising him that she knows the address of a YouTube personality which matches our victim in this case, that he lives in Las Vegas.
Hold on. They said, now they mentioned actually the YouTuber now. So they're talking about CJ So Cool now. So I guess it was kind of targeted. Because at first it sounded like they just went into this community, this wealthy community, I guess, where CJ lives. And there was multiple victims. That 77-year-old guy, I think that's how old he was. And then the other victim, which was drowned in her bathtub, which is crazy. But apparently now they're talking about the YouTubers. So we replay that part.
Defendant Queen and himself, where she is actively advising him that she knows the address of a YouTube personality which matches our victim in this case, that he lives in Las Vegas, and is coordinating with defendant McDuffie on when he's going to travel to Las Vegas so that they can touch base and ultimately commit this crime that's detailed in these pages. Defendant McDuffie confirms the identity of the victim that they're looking at when he comes to Las Vegas by telling defendant Queen that he's going to move to Vegas and we've got to do that. And when she says, do what? He replies, CJ. Then you have...
Oh, so it sounds like Raven was not on site and she was sort of like coordinating and planning this from a different location, and she had basically what appears to be like soldiers or people on foot, and that included McDuffie. And I guess she directed him because she provided the address, his location, whereabouts, details. Let's replay that part one more time.
Victim that they're looking at when he comes to Las Vegas by telling defendant Queen that he's going to move to Vegas and we've got to do that. And when she says, do what? He replies, CJ. Then you have January.
So I think they did know CJ then. Because obviously, I mean, they said it by name, CJ. Whereas the other victims, I guess, would have been just already in the community and they just said, why not? Let's do it. So it looks random. I don't know. That's my guess.
10th of 2023, defendant Queen coming from California to Las Vegas, and they're discussing getting together to commit this crime. And then on the 11th and the hours before, you have defendant Queen providing defendant McDuffie with the victim's address, as well as where they can park to commit the crime. And then you have defendant McDuffie advising defendant Queen during the course of the offense, right before they go in, that they're going to go forward because they know that the victim is asleep, that they've seen his cars, and
yeah, so that's exactly what I was thinking. So Raven must have been coordinating and planning from a distance, and then McDuffie sounds like the soldier on foot, and he's the one like going to execute the plan, and she's basically communicating with him how the plan would work, where to park, and just, I guess, how to execute whatever plan they had planned for, I guess.
they moved the victim's cameras. And I would note for the court that on this victim's house, he had cameras that had been deactivated that were destroyed or pulled from the wall that we saw the other defendants do in similar home invasions in this case.
So the cameras, they were on his house, they were deactivated. Now, they don't say whether it was deactivated by CJ or were they deactivated by the suspects. Let's replay that one.
Before they go in, that they're going to go forward because they know that the victim is asleep, that they've seen his cars.
They said they know the victim is asleep, they saw his cars. How would they know that the victim is asleep? That just, I don't know, that sounds a little bit odd. How would the suspects know that the victim, how would they know CJ was asleep? It's just like there's a lot of like questions here in between what is being said. How would the suspects know that the victim was asleep, that CJ was asleep? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
And then you have defendant McDuffie advising defendant Queen during the course of the offense, right before they go in, that they're going to go forward because they know that the victim is asleep, that they've seen his cars, and that they moved the victim's cameras. And I would note for the court that on this victim's house, he had cameras that had been deactivated that were destroyed or pulled from the wall that we saw the other defendants do in similar home invasions in this case.
So he had cameras, but he didn't have like motion sensors to detect any kind of motion outside his house. That's interesting. And the fact that they knew he was asleep.
You also have defendant McDuffie texting with defendant Roberts, who is the driver of that drives all the co-conspirators to this event. He's the case. You also have defendant McDuffie texting with defendant Roberts, who is the driver of that drives all the co-conspirators to this event. He's not only coordinating.
So Roberts is the driver, so that makes sense because Robert has the lesser of the charges. So I'm thinking Roberts is probably going to be the one, if not already, he's probably the one that has probably already did more talking, because if he has less charges, he probably has an opportunity not to get the same amount of jail time as the rest of them, because the rest of them basically went over the top on some of these victims. And like I said earlier, she was operating 2 different crews.
And discussing the use of firearms but also coordinating addresses for all the other co-conspirators on where to pick them up. Defendant McDuffie is texting defendant
So if we
Roberts.
can concentrate on Queen at this point.
Sure.
Just, I know they're very involved, but I want to do an individualized determination on each
Understood.
independently.
And Your Honor, I would note that my client is not on today, so we shouldn't be arguing my client.
This is Ms. Brown?
Yes, Your Honor.
Well,
Okay.
I'm going to discuss the evidence as it interrelates to all the.
Sure, if it has some nexus, but if it's between two other co-defendants, constrain that till the point where we get to that first.
Okay.
Okay.
What you do see as we detail text with the other co-conspirators, and the text to defendant Roberts do relate to defendant Queen because they are carbon copies of defendant Queen's texts to defendant McDuffie at the address and locations to park, forwarded on to yet another co-conspirator who is the driver of the situation. You also.
Yeah, so I mean, if they have one phone, then they're pretty much they have evidence connecting all the other parties, all the other suspects. And when they said earlier that they were able to find the abandoned brown bag, which included one of these suspects' phones, I think it was McDuffie or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. In any case, it is one of the suspects' phones, so it's obviously he's in connection with all the others because they are communicating via text messages. So I don't know what she was trying to say, that because her suspect is not in attendance, that somehow they can just exclude him from the conversation, or doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Defendant Queen associated with these multiple home invasions committed by defendants Washington, Lee, Cabot, and Butler. We have the home invasion videos from January 11th, where you see 2 home invasions where the victims aren't home. We provided the court with video surveillance from both of those incidents.
So there was actually 2 other home invasions where the victims were not home. So this is in addition to the 3 victims that they've been talking about so far. So that's CJ So Cool. The other victim is the one that's 70 years old, that got beaten up by 4 suspects and is going through, like, he's got some like brain damage or something like that. And then the third suspect was dragged. The third victim was dragged, beaten up, pistol whipped, and drowned in her own bathtub. And then we got 2 others where the victims were not home.
We provided the court with video surveillance from the Cancun resort where the defendant Queen was staying, and was essentially a headquarters where these crews would come and either stay with her or meet with her prior to committing these offenses. Cancun.
So it looks like Raven Queen, the ringleader, is operating out of Cancun. This is her headquarters office, and then she's basically calling all the shots from there. She's planning and coordinating. I guess the crews would go there, I don't know, to get the equipment, get their gear, and then go about their business. So it sounds like it's pretty well sophisticated.
Resort where the defendant Queen was staying, and was essentially a headquarters where these crews would come and either stay with her or meet with her prior to committing these offenses. We have defendant Queen registering at the Cancun resort using the phone number we know to be hers. That all detailed records show her be in the area of each of the events charged with, that are the January 11th home invasions and the home invasion at Queens Ridge.
So she used this same exact phone that she used to communicate with all the other suspects or co-conspirators. The same phone number. I thought if you were, a little bit smart, you would use different phones, different numbers, but I guess they were planning this on the idea that nobody would get caught, that none of the suspects involved would lose their phone, or they would not get caught, or they would drop the bag or something.
We have her with her co-conspirators going into their hotel room after defendant Queen checks in. Then they get changed into the clothes that you see them in during the course of these home invasions that are captured on tape, which is the dark hoodies, the dark pants, the masks, etc. And then they're captured leaving defendant Queen's hotel room, getting on the elevator and leaving right before these home invasion events take place. And again, defendant Queen, as far as the January 11th home invasions and attempt home invasion, defendant Queen's call detail records show her traveling from the Cancun to those locations as well. Again, while we're not saying she went in, she's organizing and coordinating each of these events. She was nearby during the course of those home invasions. Then you turn your honor to the January 12th Queensridge home invasion. This is the one in which the victims were bound with duct tape, pistol whipped, and Jenny Lee was drowned underwater in her own bathtub.
That victim was drowned underwater. I don't know if you guys heard that part. Let's replay that part. They drowned this victim. They dragged her, beat her up, pistol whipped her, and then drowned her. Why would they want to drown her? Sounds pretty violent.
This is the one in which the victims were bound with duct tape, pistol whipped, and Jenny Lee was drowned underwater in her own bathtub. You have...
That sounds crazy. And her lawyers are trying to get her out. They're trying to reduce her bail, which makes no sense because if she's facing $750,000 bail or $1 million and then trying to get it down to $100,000, what difference is it going to make? She doesn't have $100,000. And why would they want to release her to go back to California? Are they crazy? Like, she's done a bunch of these like similar burglaries in California and got caught. Now she got caught in Vegas doing about like 3 of these or maybe 5, something like that. On top of the fact that she shot some of them, she beat up one so bad, and then the third victim is they drowned her in the bathtub. Like, and they want to release her to go back to California. Are they crazy? No wonder like she gets like when I was looking at her previous court records. It's got to be like so many cases very similar. I'm like, why does she keeps getting released if she's known to be doing this kind of activity? It makes no sense.
Again, video evidence of them leaving the Cancun in the clothing that is similar to what was described by the victims. You have the victims reporting 4 black males coming in. That's again consistent with the 4 individuals that we've charged that were leaving the hotel at the same time. And you have we have phone records from defendant Butler showing him in communication with defendant Queen on FaceTime during the course of the home invasion. Defendant Butler is outstanding right now, but his phone, and I'll get to the arrest in a moment,
So Butler is outstanding, and he's the one that had a conversation via FaceTime with Raven.
On FaceTime during the course of the home invasion. Defendant Butler is outstanding right now, but his phone, and I'll get to the arrest in a moment, his phone was recovered from the arrest of defendants Washington, Lee, Queen, Cabot, and Butler. All of them were arrested inside a home coming back to Las Vegas some weeks after these events.
Okay, so they caught some of these suspects already weeks after, because I guess they were at an Airbnb. Like, the police did a pretty good job along with the FBI, to follow all the footsteps, and then trace it. They got them pretty well in a very short period of time.
Inside that home, multiple phones that had been destroyed. One was still intact enough for them to conduct a forensic download. That was defendant Butler's phone, which, again, ties back defendant Queen to each of these events because during the January 11th home invasion and attempt home invasion, we see one of the suspects on a phone, as if on FaceTime, speaking with someone throughout the course of the home invasion event. Records show defendant Butler, who again searched these victims' residences where they are at, is on the phone per his own phone records with defendant Queen at that time in communication throughout each of the home invasion events. That victim Jenny Lee stating that the male who was with her that put her under the bathtub was also on his phone during the course of this home invasion event. and he was speaking to a woman on the other end of the line. You could hear it was a woman's.
So one of the victims was able to confirm Butler as the suspect that was on FaceTime with Raven Queen. So like I said, it sounds like Raven was operating remotely, but she had planned this all out very well to the point that she was coordinating and advising them exactly how to enter, how to exit, where to park, what to do, how to do it, timing wise. So this is what I mean, like when we dropped videos earlier, I was like, she seems to be the ringleader. She seems to be the real professional here. But I guess the people that she recruited or possibly were in a gang, I think they're going to get to that part eventually, the gang activity or gang relationship or association.
Voice. He was providing updates as to how the robbery was going. We have phone records from defendant Butler's phone showing him.
Oh, so he was giving updates to Raven Queen as to how the robbery was going. That is crazy. That she would check in with them just to get updates on what the progress is. I mean, she might as well could have just put a GPS on them or an RFID chip or something.
In communication with defendant Queen at the time of the home invasion event that took place at the Queensridge. You also have social media records from defendant Queen showing that during the home invasion, while these men are in there torturing these people to extract money from them and get them to open safes, she is searching on Facebook the victims' names. And these are very unique names, Your Honor. These individuals are of Chinese descent, and they have very distinct Chinese names that would be listed in the statement of facts I provided. But it's I want to just say it for the record. Give me one moment.
So she was searching for one of the victims who has a very unique name. But why is she searching on Facebook for her? I mean, if her team is already in the house and they're trying to extract money or valuables, why would she want to go on Facebook and find her?
It's Zhengni Li. That's Zhengni. Li is L-E, and Hong Shu Liu, and Liu is L-U-I. You have defendant Queen on Facebook while the home invasion is taking place, searching multiple variations of those very specific names. Then you have Instagram records of defendant Queen after the fact, attempting to sell a Birkin bag and a Chanel bag that belong to the victim, Jenny Lee.
So while the crime is in progress, she is actually trying to resell items that have been stolen or in the progress of being stolen from the. So this definitely sounds like it's real. It sounds like targeted. That she would actually. I mean, if I understand this correctly, she located these victims on Facebook, found out their valuables. So if they actually show off this stuff, then look up their whereabouts, their residence, go to the residence, try to take the valuables, then try to resell it while the crime is actually in progress. Folks, that is crazy. That is so crazy. Like, she's trying to get rid of basically the stolen property while they're in progress of actually committing the crime. Wow. That's like a whole other level.
They're very unique bags. One of them was discontinued. Ms. Lee was able to identify. The Birkin bag was a unique teal color and had a very specific scarf wrapped around the handle that the defendant Queen is attempting to sell in the immediate aftermath of this event, and that Jenny Lee was able to identify as hers.
Now you can tell, like, although the plan sounds pretty smart, they're gonna try to steal this stuff, this like very expensive piece of material, these Birkin bags or whatever. Although the plan sounds pretty smart, like they're in the house, torturing the victim, trying to find the valuables, and then also at the same time trying to resell it getting rid of the stolen property, trying to get it in exchange for actual money or whatever. But overall, it's still pretty stupid, because you are taking something that is so exclusive. It's going to be pretty easy to find when you sell it. There's going to be a trail once that item is sold, because it's so exclusive that the people you sell it to are going to be able to figure, when law enforcement approaches them, they're going to be able to tell on you or whoever is going to be the one that actually does the exchange. And it's going to eventually come back to you. It's going to be a trail backwards. So although the plan sounded pretty smart, trying to steal or do the crime in progress and then resell it at the same time to get it off their hands, whoever is the one to receive the stolen property, whether they're going to buy it from the suspects, is still going to be traceable, because that person is going to be able to identify who sold them the property. And then once they capture that idiot is going to have to tell on the rest of the other idiots. So it just goes to show you that you shouldn't even do this kind of stuff. You shouldn't be stealing. You shouldn't be doing stupid shit like this, even if you have a very outlined, sophisticated strategy or plan, because somebody's going to have to be in physical presence, and getting rid of it. And then that person is going to be identified at the end of the day once they do their investigation and find out who actually bought this property. It's going to be reversible. It's going to be traceable. There's going to be, if they do it in public, I'm sure a lot of these people that are, unless they try to steal the buyer's money as well, like the moral of this story, you shouldn't be stealing other people's stuff.
Then you have video evidence, Your Honor, of the defendants immediately after this robbery event fleeing the state and heading back to California. And our phone detail records corroborate that as to Defendant Queen. But beyond that, we have video evidence in Barstow where they stopped at 1 a.m. after they're fleeing the state to get gas and grab a few snacks. And they're still wearing the same clothing that they were seen wearing. Again, you see Defendant Queen, Defendant Lee, and Defendant Butler all together in that convenience store on their way back to California, showing that they're together before, during, and after these events. And again, a lot of this is going to overlap as to each of the defendants as we move forward.
All right, so yeah, you guys got the final. Well, this is not the final, but we're gonna wrap it up here because there's it's pretty long. This is they're gonna start talking about the other suspects, from this is all right now. This is all the conversation now, or what he's talking about is all really from the perspective of Raven Queen, the ringleader, and then I guess he'll present it from the other suspects' perspectives, or how they actually initiated their crimes all the way to the end. But this kind of gives you guys an overview as to what happened. So again, the moral of the story, you should not be stealing, even if you have a very sophisticated plan, because even with a sophisticated plan, eventually somebody's going to have to sell the stolen property. That person, whoever it is going to have to be physically present, has to go interact with the potential buyer, take the money. And even the potential buyer, if you're buying something this valuable, there's going to be, and we haven't even gotten to the elements of actually posting the items online for sale, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, and then they're using their own accounts. Like Raven Queen was on her own Instagram account. Like at times I feel like she was smart and stupid at the same time. So at the end of the day, even if you try to fake your account, there's still IP addresses, there's, router IPs, GIS coordinates. So like I said, although it sounded like a very smart, sophisticated plan, the technical aspects of it are still in place. So even if you try to mask your identity or create a fake identity, you're still going to be traceable on the technical side. Then the actual physical presence of actually selling the stolen property, that's also reversible and traceable, because the buyer is going to be able to identify who approached them to sell them the stolen property. So there's so many angles to this stuff, and it just tells you at the end of the day, you're going to get caught eventually. So the moral of the story, you shouldn't be stealing at all. Even if people are in your ears, peer pressure, people telling you that they're going to be able to have the most advanced, sophisticated, nicest way of executing this plan. At some point, something's going to fall off, and somebody's going to make a mistake. Somebody's going to drop the bag. Somebody's going to get caught. You know, there's all kinds of risk factors involved here. And then, like I said, this is all excluding the technical piece of it, because people think that their phones are not going to track them. Your phones are being tracked through towers. Carriers are going to be able to identify all your moving spots. So people are like so stupid. Like I said earlier, although it sounds like a very smart plan, eventually it was going to fail. Whether it being from the technical side or from the actual selling the stolen property or dropping any piece of evidence, which it sounds like they dropped a brown bag with a phone inside, to camera footage. There's just too many pieces to it, folks. But anyways, we're going to wrap it up here. We'll probably do a part 2, maybe a part 3, just so I don't drag this video too long. Well, let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments section. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching.